In the mists of 10th century England, when the crown was as perilous as it was precious, there rose a boy king whose reign flickered like a candle in the storm. His name was Edward, son of Edgar the Peaceful, heir to Alfred the Great, and remembered forever not for conquests or laws, but for a death so shocking, so soaked in betrayal, that the people of England named him not merely king, but martyr. His reign lasted just 3 short years, 975-978. Yet in that brief span, Edward's life became a saga of family rivalries, political treachery, churchly intrigue, and the shadow of a murder that would shape the destiny of England itself. This is not the tale of a victorious conqueror. It is the tale of a boy who ruled too young, trusted too much, and whose blood at Corfe Castle would mark the crown with tragedy. Edward was born the eldest son of King Edgar, 959 to 975, one of the greatest rulers of the Anglo-Saxon age. Edgar's reign was known as a golden time of unity and stability. He had bound England together, worked in harmony with the reforming church, and was hailed as a king whose authority stretched from the Channel to the Scots. But Edgar's personal life was far less peaceful. He had several wives and concubines, and from these unions came rival sons, Edward the elder and Thelard the younger, born to Edgar's second wife, Glothrith. This split bloodline would prove fatal, for when Edgar the Peaceful died unexpectedly in 975 at only about 32 years old, the crown passed not to a seasoned ruler, but to his boy son Edward, just 12 or 13 years of age. From the very start, Edward's kingship was contested. 2 factions formed: Edward's party, led by Archbishop Dunstan of Canterbury, the towering churchman who had guided kings since Athelstan, and who believed Edward, though young, was the rightful heir. Thelred's party, led by Queen Glothrith, the boy's ambitious mother, who claimed the crown for her younger son. The nobility split. The church itself divided. Some magnates saw in Edward a weak child they could manipulate. Others feared his fiery temper, and still others, siding with Thelard, whispered that Edward's legitimacy was questionable, his birth shadowed by scandal. But Dunstan, the iron-willed archbishop, stood before the Witan, the king's council, and thundered that Edward, son of Edgar, was the true king. Owing to his authority, the nobles agreed reluctantly. Thus the boy was crowned, though his crown rested uneasily on his head. Edward was no idle child. Contemporary sources paint him as quick, intelligent, and passionate. But he was also impetuous, prone to bursts of anger, and unskilled in the arts of compromise. He inherited a kingdom on edge. Edgar had favored monastic reform, granting lands and privileges to abbeys and monks. But many powerful nobles resented this, having lost lands to the church. Now, with Edgar dead and a boy on the throne, these disgruntled lords struck back. Civil unrest spread. Monasteries were attacked, lands seized, monks expelled. Chroniclers describe it as a time of great turmoil, with the king's writ barely obeyed beyond his court. Edward, still so young, was caught between the fiery zeal of Dunstan and the grasping ambitions of the nobility. And always behind the shadows was Glothrith, the stepmother who schemed for her own son Thelard. Glothrith, Edward's stepmother, was no ordinary queen. Chroniclers portray her as one of the most ambitious and ruthless women of the age. Some even likened her to the scheming queens of legend, whispering that she would stop at nothing to see her son crowned. Her weapon was patience. While Edward alienated nobles with his youthful arrogance, Gloucester quietly won allies. She spread whispers that Edward was cruel, unfit to rule, that his rashness endangered England itself. Meanwhile, Thellard, just a child himself, was styled the more gentle brother. The kingdom split into factions. It was not open war, but a cold civil conflict, smoldering in courts and councils with each side waiting for its moment. That moment came in March 978. Edward was riding near Corfe Castle, where Queen Glathrith resided with young Thellard. The king, then only about 16, stopped to visit his stepmother and half-brother. It was meant to be a friendly call, the boy king unguarded, perhaps seeking reconciliation, but treachery awaited. As he dismounted his horse, Edward was offered a cup of wine. Then, struck suddenly, perhaps stabbed, perhaps seized, he was attacked by retainers loyal to the queen. The boy reeled, wounded. His horse bolted, dragging him as he clutched the saddle, his lifeblood spilling into the earth. The King of England, betrayed in the home of his stepmother, died without aid. He was just 16 years old. The chroniclers do not agree on details. Some claim Glathrith orchestrated it. Others leave it to dark suggestion. But all agree Edward was murdered, and Thellard, the younger brother, became king. The murder horrified England. The people, even those who had doubted Edward, were outraged. A king murdered not in battle, but through treachery at his own family's hearth. Such an act was beyond forgiveness. The boy's body was hastily buried at Wareham, but miracles were soon reported at his grave. The common folk began to venerate him as a holy martyr, a king slain unjustly, innocent in the eyes of God. Within a generation, he was canonized as St. Edward the Martyr. His remains were moved to Shaftesbury Abbey, where pilgrims flocked, and his cult spread across England. Even kings who followed revered his memory, lest they too fall under God's judgment. Edward's murder cleared the way for Thellard, known to history as Thellard the Unready, unread, meaning ill-advised. His reign 978-1016 would be one of the darkest in English history, plagued by Viking invasions, disastrous policies, and endless bloodshed. In hindsight, Edward's death was not only a tragedy, it was a catastrophe for England. The boy king, impetuous though he was, might have matured into a strong ruler like his grandfather Edgar. Instead, his murder condemned England to decades of chaos. And so, in death, Edward's image grew brighter. He was remembered as pure, innocent, and wronged, a boy martyr whose blood cried out against treachery, while his brother's long reign became a cautionary tale of ruin. Edward ruled for only 3 years. He passed no great laws, won no great battles, built no mighty monuments. Yet his story endures as one of the most dramatic in Anglo-Saxon history. He was the boy king caught in a web of ambition. He was the victim of a stepmother's schemes. He was the martyr whose cult rivaled even great saints. And though he reigned but briefly, his death shaped England's fate. His blood at Corfe Castle was the spark that lit the fire of Theodred's disastrous reign, leading ultimately to Viking conquest and the fall of the House of Alfred. Edward's tragedy was not only personal, it was national. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle records Edward's reign in only a few lines, yet those lines echo with sorrow. And in this year was King Edward killed at Corfe, and his body was first buried at Wareham. And afterwards it was carried to Shaftesbury, and miracles were wrought there. a boy crowned in uncertainty, slain in treachery, remembered in sanctity. Edward the Martyr's reign was as brief as a candle flame flickering, fragile, yet in its very extinguishing, casting a light that has endured for more than 1,000 years.